The mountain man's calloused hands shaped the leather with a precision that belied their size, his muscular forearms flexing as he worked the brim into a perfect curve, and he wondered if the woman who had ordered this hat 3 weeks ago would ever return to claim it. Lincoln Yates had been crafting hats and other leather work in his small shop on the edge of Las Animas, Colorado, since he had come down from the mountains 2 years prior in 1878, seeking something he could not name among the scattered buildings and dusty streets of this frontier town. The June heat pressed against the wooden walls of his shop, and sweat beaded on his tanned forehead, dripping past the dark hair that hung to his shoulders in waves he never bothered to trim properly. His massive frame barely fit behind the small work table, his broad shoulders hunched as he stitched the final seam with thread he had waxed himself. The door opened with a creak that made him look up, and there she stood again. Rose Harper had visited his shop exactly 4 times in the past month, each time with a new excuse to examine his work, to ask questions about leather treatment or stitching methods, her green eyes bright with curiosity that seemed to extend beyond mere craftsmanship. She wore a faded blue dress that had seen better days, patched at the elbows and hem, and her auburn hair was pulled back in a simple braid that had come slightly loose in the heat. Lincoln noticed these things because he had trained himself to notice details during his years alone in the high country, where missing a single sign could mean the difference between eating and starving, between living and freezing to death in an unexpected storm. "Mr. Yates," she said, her voice carrying the soft politeness of someone who had been raised with manners but had fallen on harder times. "I came to see if my hat was ready." He held it up, the leather supple and golden brown, the brim shaped to provide maximum shade without obstructing vision. It was his finest work in months, perhaps because he had known it was for her. "Just finished the last stitch," he said, his deep voice rumbling in his chest. "Come try it on." She stepped closer, and he caught the faint scent of lavender soap, a luxury he knew she could barely afford. Rose worked as a seamstress in town, taking in mending and alterations from the few families who could pay, and he had learned through casual conversation with the shopkeeper next door that she sent most of her earnings back east to support her younger sister's education. The hat had been an extravagance, something she had saved for over many months, and Lincoln had charged her less than half his usual price, though he had never told her so. When she placed it on her head, the fit was perfect, and her face transformed with a smile that made something shift in his chest. "It is beautiful," she said, touching the brim with reverent fingers. "I've never owned anything so fine." "Suits you," he said, then cleared his throat because the words had come out rougher than he intended. "You can pay me when you are able. No rush." She shook her head quickly. "I have the money. I have been saving." From a small pouch at her waist, she counted out coins slowly, making sure each one was accounted for, and he could see that this payment represented a significant portion of her resources. He wanted to refuse it, to tell her to keep her money for food or fabric or whatever else she needed, but he knew that would wound her pride, and pride was sometimes all a person had in this harsh country. After she left, Lincoln sat in his shop and tried to return to his work, but his mind kept circling back to the way she had looked in that hat, the way her smile had reached her eyes. He had lived alone for so long that he had nearly forgotten what it felt like to care about someone else's happiness, to want to see that smile again and again. 3 days later, he saw her on the main street of Las Animas, walking toward the general store with a basket over her arm. She wore the hat, and it did indeed suit her perfectly, shading her fair skin from the relentless Colorado sun. But as he watched from his position outside the livery stable, where he had gone to purchase new leather, he saw her stop abruptly in front of a man sitting against the wall of the bank building. The man was old, perhaps 60 or more, and completely bald, his scalp sunburned and peeling. He wore clothes that might have once been respectable, but were now little more than rags, and his eyes had the glazed look of someone suffering from heat and dehydration. A tin cup sat beside him, empty of both water and coins. Lincoln watched as Rose knelt beside the man, speaking words he could not hear from this distance. The old man shook his head, gesturing weakly toward the sun, and then toward his bare head. Without hesitation, Rose removed the hat from her head, the hat she had saved for months to purchase, the hat Lincoln had poured his skill and care into creating, and placed it gently on the old man's bald head. The bald man's weathered face crumpled with emotion, and he tried to refuse, but Rose was already standing, already pressing some coins into his tin cup, already moving away before he could protest further. She walked on toward the general store, her auburn hair now exposed to the burning sun, and she did not look back. Lincoln stood frozen, the leather strap in his hand forgotten. Something massive and overwhelming rose in his chest, a feeling so intense it was almost painful. He had seen many acts of kindness in his life, small gestures and large sacrifices, but there was something about this moment that struck him differently. Rose Harper had so little, and she had given away something precious without a second thought, as naturally as breathing. He waited until she emerged from the general store, her basket now containing a few wrapped parcels, and intercepted her at the corner near the church. "Miss Harper," he said, and she turned, startled, a hand going to her now bare head as if she had forgotten the hat was gone. "Mr. Yates," she said, and a faint blush colored her cheeks. "I'm sorry. I know the hat was expensive, and I just gave it away, but that poor man was suffering so badly from the sun, and I could not just walk past him." "I saw what you did," Lincoln said. His throat felt tight, and he struggled to find words adequate to what he was feeling. "I saw you give him the hat." Her blush deepened. "You must think me foolish." "No," he said, and the word came out fierce, more intense than he meant. "No, I think your heart is too big good." She blinked at him, and he realized his words had come out wrong, jumbled by the force of his emotion. He had spent so many years alone in the mountains that sometimes his tongue could not keep pace with his thoughts, especially when those thoughts were tangled up with feelings he barely understood. "Too big and good," he corrected, shaking his head. "Your heart is too big and too good for this world." Her eyes searched his face, and something passed between them in that dusty street, something that felt like recognition, like two people seeing each other clearly for the first time. "He needed it more than I did," she said quietly, "and I could not bear to see him suffering when I had the means to help." Lincoln made a decision in that moment, one that felt both impulsive and inevitable. "Come with me," he said, offering her his arm. "Back to my shop." She hesitated only a moment before taking his arm, and he was acutely aware of her small hand resting on his muscular forearm, the warmth of her presence beside him as they walked. When they reached his shop, he held the door open for her and gestured to the chair near his work table. "Sit," he said, already reaching for leather that he had been aging for a special project. "I am going to make you a new hat." "Mr. Yates, I cannot afford another one," she protested. "It took me months to save for the first." "This one is free," he said, his tone brooking no argument. "You gave away the hat I made because your heart is good. I'm going to make you another one, a better one, because your heart deserves to be honored." "I cannot accept charity," she said, and he could hear the pride in her voice, the same pride that had made her count out every coin for the first hat. He paused in his work and looked at her directly, his blue eyes intense under dark brows. "It is not charity. It is gratitude." "For what?" "For reminding me that there is still goodness in the world," he said simply. "I have been alone a long time, Miss Harper. I came down from the mountains because I was tired of the solitude, but I found that being around people did not cure the loneliness. I still felt separate, apart. But watching you give that hat to a stranger who needed it, watching you act with such simple kindness, it reminded me why I came down in the first place. It reminded me what it means to be human and not just surviving." She sat very still, her hands folded in her lap. "You are a strange man, Mr. Yates." "I know," he admitted, and felt a small smile tug at his mouth. "Years in the mountains will do that to a person." "Tell me about it," she said. "About the mountains." So as he worked, measuring her head with a cloth tape, selecting the finest leather from his stock, cutting and shaping with sure movements, he told her. He spoke of winters so cold that breath froze in the air, of summers when wildflowers carpeted meadows in riots of color, of tracking elk through deep snow and fishing in streams so clear you could count the stones at the bottom. He told her about the silence, how complete and absolute it could be, how it could feel like both peace and torture, depending on the day. He told her about learning to read the sky, to understand the language of wind and cloud, to predict storms hours before they arrived. And as he talked, she listened with an attention that felt like a gift. She asked questions that showed she was truly hearing him, not just waiting for her turn to speak. She wanted to know about his family, and he told her about his father who had died when Lincoln was young, his mother who had remarried a man Lincoln could not abide, his decision to leave at 17 and head west to make his own way. That had been in 1868, 10 years ago now, and he had spent 8 of those years in the high country before coming to Los Animas. "Why did you come down?" she asked. "If you loved it so much." He paused in his stitching, considering the question, honestly. "I think I was afraid I would forget how to be around people," he said finally. "I was afraid I would become so wild and alone that I could never come back. And there was a part of me that wanted more than just survival. I wanted to create things, to use my hands for something beyond just staying alive another day. And have you found what you were looking for?" "I'm starting to think I might have," he said, and looked at her meaningfully. The blush returned to her cheeks, and she looked down at her hands. "Mr. Yates, I should tell you something. I have nothing to offer a man. I have no family here, no money beyond what I earn from my sewing, no prospects. I send most of my earnings to my sister back in Boston. She is 17 and studying to be a teacher, and our parents are gone. I am all she has." "That speaks well of you," Lincoln said, beginning to shape the brim of her new hat. "You are caring for family. That is honorable." "But it means I have nothing left over," she continued, as if she needed to make him understand the full extent of her poverty. "I live in a boarding house in a small room I can barely afford. I eat bread and cheese most days. I own 3 dresses, and they are all patched. I'm not a good prospect for any man." Lincoln set down his tools and came to stand before her, his massive frame making her seem even more delicate by comparison. "Miss Harper," he said gently. "I lived in a cave for 2 winters. I ate pine nuts and dried meat for months at a time. I owned nothing but the clothes on my back and the tools I needed to survive. I do not care about money or prospects. I care about character. I care about the kind of person who gives away a hat she saved months to buy because a stranger is suffering in the sun." Tears welled in her eyes. "Why are you being so kind to me?" "Because I have not felt this way in a very long time," he said honestly. "Maybe ever. Because when I saw you give that hat away, something in my chest cracked open, and I realized I have been walking around only half alive for years. Because I would like to know you better, if you would permit it." "I would like that too," she whispered. He returned to his work then, and they settled into a comfortable silence punctuated by occasional conversation. She told him about her sister Clara, who was clever and studious and determined to make something of herself. She told him about their parents, a father who had been a clerk and died of pneumonia, a mother who had succumbed to grief a year later. She told him about coming west because she had heard there was work and opportunity, about the difficult journey in a cramped wagon, about arriving in Los Animas with almost nothing and slowly building a small business through her skill with a needle. "I want Clara to have better than I have had," Rose said. "I want her to have education and choices. I want her to be able to support herself without depending on any man." "That is a good dream," Lincoln said, and meant it. He had known too many women trapped by circumstance, unable to leave bad situations because they had no means of supporting themselves. The idea of Rose sacrificing her own comfort to give her sister freedom moved him deeply. By the time the sun began to set, casting orange light through the shop windows, the hat was complete. It was even finer than the first one, with subtle tooling along the band and a brim shaped precisely to her face. He had worked with a focus and care that transformed the leather into something nearly alive, something that carried his regard for her in every stitch. When he placed it on her head, his fingers brushed her temples, and he felt her shiver slightly at the contact. "Perfect," he said softly. She stood and went to the small mirror he kept on the wall, studying her reflection. "It is too fine," she said. "You have given me something too precious." "Nothing is too precious for you," he said, and watched her eyes meet his in the mirror. She turned to face him, the hat still on her head, and crossed the small space between them. Without planning it, without thinking about propriety or caution, she reached up and touched his bearded jaw with gentle fingers. "Thank you," she said. He covered her small hand with his much larger one, holding it against his face. "Rose," he said, using her given name for the first time. "May I court you properly?" "Yes," she said immediately. "Yes, you may." That night, Lincoln walked her back to her boarding house, and they talked about everything and nothing, comfortable in each other's presence in a way that usually took months or years to develop. When they reached her door, he took her hand and pressed it to his lips in a gesture that was old-fashioned and courtly, something she would not have expected from a mountain man. "Tomorrow?" he asked. "Tomorrow," she agreed. Over the following weeks, Lincoln courted Rose with a devotion that became the talk of Las Animas. He brought her wildflowers from the hills, taught her to identify edible plants, took her on careful walks along the Purgatoire River where they could talk in private. He was always respectful, always aware of her reputation, but there was an intensity to his attention that left no doubt about his feelings. Rose bloomed under his regard. She smiled more, laughed more, carried herself with a new confidence. The other seamstresses in town noticed and asked her questions. She deflected with gentle humor, but she could not hide the happiness that radiated from her. Lincoln found himself transformed as well. The loneliness that had plagued him for so long dissolved in her presence. He worked with renewed purpose, creating pieces that were increasingly sought after. The money was good, better than he had expected, and he began to allow himself to dream of a future he had not thought possible. One evening in late July, as they sat by the river watching the sunset, Rose asked him about his plans. "Do you intend to stay in Las Animas?" "I do," he said. "I've built something here, a business, a life. I would not want to leave unless I had a compelling reason." "And if I had to leave?" she asked carefully. "If something happened with Clara, if she needed me, if I had to go back east?" He turned to look at her fully, his blue eyes serious. "Then I would go with you if you would have me. I will not lie and say I would love the city, but I would endure it for you." "You would leave all this?" She gestured at the landscape around them, the open spaces he loved. "Rose, I left the mountains for the hope of connection," he said. "I found more than connection with you. I found home. Home is not a place. It is a person. It is you." She leaned into him and he wrapped his massive arm around her shoulders, tucking her against his side. They sat like that as the stars emerged one by one, and neither of them spoke because words were not necessary. August brought intense heat to the Colorado plains, and with it came trouble. A group of drifters moved through Las Animas, rough men who made decent people nervous. They drank heavily at the saloon and made rude comments to women on the street. Lincoln heard about them harassing Rose outside her boarding house and felt a cold rage settle in his gut. He found her the next morning and saw the fear in her eyes, though she tried to hide it. "They did not hurt me," she said quickly. "They just said crude things. It is nothing I have not heard before." "It is not nothing," he said, his jaw tight. "Where are they staying?" "Lincoln, do not do anything rash," she pleaded. "They are dangerous men." "I have dealt with dangerous men before," he said grimly. "Bears and mountain lions, too. I will not have them frightening you." That afternoon, he found the drifters outside the saloon and approached them with the confidence of a man who had faced down predators with nothing but a knife. There were 4 of them, all armed, all larger than average. But Lincoln was larger still, his muscular frame honed by years of hard living, and he carried himself with the authority of someone who understood violence intimately and did not fear it. "You men bothered a woman last night," he said without preamble. "You will apologize to her and then you will leave town." The leader, a man with a scar across his nose, laughed. "Who's going to make us, mountain man?" "I am," Lincoln said simply. What followed was brief and brutal. Lincoln did not want to fight, but he would not back down, and when the leader swung at him, he responded with economical violence born of necessity rather than cruelty. He did not strike to humiliate or punish, but to end the threat quickly. Within minutes, all 4 men were on the ground, nursing injuries that would heal but would remind them to be more respectful. The sheriff, an older man named Tom Bridges, came running at the sound of the commotion. He surveyed the scene, looked at Lincoln standing calmly while the drifters groaned in the dust, and sighed. "I suppose they had it coming?" "They bothered Miss Harper," Lincoln said. "I encouraged them to apologize and leave town." Sheriff Bridges nodded slowly. "I have been wanting them gone myself, but they had not done anything I could arrest them for. You boys," he addressed the drifters, "collect your things and be gone by sundown, or I will find a reason to lock you up." The drifters left, and Lincoln went to find Rose. She had heard about the confrontation and met him with worry in her eyes. "Are you hurt?" "Not even a bruise," he assured her. "They were loud but not skilled." She threw her arms around him, and he held her close, feeling the tremor in her frame. "I was so frightened," she admitted. Not for myself, but for you. I'm not easy to hurt, he said, stroking her hair. The mountains taught me to be hard to kill. Do not joke, she said, but there was relief in her voice. I am not joking, he said seriously. Rose, I need you to understand something. I will always protect you. I will always stand between you and harm. That is not me being possessive or thinking you are weak. It is me honoring what you have given me. You have given me purpose again, a reason to be among people. You have given me joy. I will spend the rest of my life making sure you are safe and happy, if you will let me. She pulled back to look up at him, her green eyes searching his face. Lincoln Yates, are you proposing to me in the middle of the street after beating up 4 men? He blinked, then laughed, a deep rumbling sound that made people nearby turn to look. I suppose I'm doing this backward. I had planned something more romantic. This is romantic enough, she said, smiling through tears. You fought for my honor like a knight in one of Clara's storybooks. I am no knight, he said, just a man who loves you more than he thought it was possible to love anyone. And I love you, she said. I have loved you since you said my heart was too big good, with that fierce look on your face, like you were angry at the world for not being as kind as you wanted it to be. He kissed her then, properly and thoroughly, in front of half the town, and did not care who saw. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he said, Marry me, please. Yes, she said. Yes, absolutely yes. They were married in September, in the small church with half the town in attendance. Rose wore a new dress she had made herself, pale blue with delicate stitching, and Lincoln wore his best clothes, his hair neatly trimmed for the occasion, though still longer than was fashionable. The ceremony was simple and heartfelt, and when the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Lincoln kissed his bride with such tender reverence that several women in the congregation wept. They had saved enough for a small house on the edge of town, a simple structure with 2 rooms that Lincoln began expanding immediately. He built a workshop attached to the house so Rose would not have to sew in the boarding house anymore, and he added a bedroom that would eventually become a nursery, though they did not speak of that yet. Life settled into a pattern that was both domestic and deeply satisfying. Lincoln worked on his leather crafting, creating not just hats but also saddles, bags, and belts that people came from neighboring towns to purchase. Rose continued her sewing, building a reputation for quality work that kept her busy. In the evenings, they cooked together, ate together, and talked about their days with the comfortable intimacy of partners who genuinely enjoyed each other's company. Clara wrote regularly from Boston, and Rose read her letters aloud to Lincoln, sharing her sister's progress and challenges. Clara was doing well in her studies, excelling in mathematics and literature, and she wrote with excitement about her future prospects. Rose's sacrifices were bearing fruit, and Lincoln could see the satisfaction this gave her. You are a good sister, he told her one night as they lay in bed, her head resting on his broad chest. Clara is lucky to have you. I just want her to have choices, Rose said. I want her to never feel trapped. You are not trapped with me, are you? He asked, a note of concern in his voice. She propped herself up to look at him, her face serious. Lincoln, being with you is the freest I have ever felt. You have never tried to control me or diminish me. You support my work and my dreams. You are my partner, not my master. I did not know marriage could be like this. He cupped her face in his large hand. You deserve nothing less. You are remarkable, Rose. Every day I wake up grateful that you chose me. We chose each other, she corrected gently. Winter came to Los Animas, bringing cold winds and occasional snow. Lincoln reveled in the weather, having missed the bite of real cold during the hot summer months. He taught Rose how to read the signs of incoming storms, how to prepare for harsh weather, how to move through snow without exhausting herself. She learned eagerly, fascinated by the knowledge he had accumulated during his mountain years. One particularly cold day in January of 1879, Rose was working in her sewing room when she heard a commotion outside. Looking out the window, she saw a family struggling down the street, their wagon broken down, their children crying from cold. Without hesitation, she grabbed her shawl and ran out to help. Lincoln returned from delivering a saddle to find their small house full of strangers. A young couple, probably no more than 25, and their 3 children, ranging from about 8 years down to a baby. Rose had given them soup and bread, and Lincoln could see from the worn condition of their clothes and the thinness of their faces that they had been traveling hard with little resources. "Lincoln, this is Matthew and Sarah Crawford," Rose said, introducing them. "Their wagon broke an axle just outside town, and they have nowhere to go. I told them they could stay here until they figure out what to do." Lincoln saw the fear in the young father's eyes, the shame of having to accept charity, and recognized it, because he had felt the same way once. "You are welcome here," he said firmly. "No one should be on the road in this weather with children." The Crawfords stayed for 3 days while Matthew worked to repair his wagon and earn enough money for supplies. Lincoln gave him odd jobs around the shop, paying fair wages, and Rose mended their clothes and made sure the children were fed. By the time they left, Matthew had tears in his eyes. "We will never forget this kindness," he said, shaking Lincoln's hand with both of his own. "If we can ever repay you, we will." "Pay it forward," Lincoln said. "Help someone else when you are able." After they left, Lincoln found Rose in the kitchen, staring out at the snowy landscape. "You have a gift," he said, wrapping his arms around her from behind, "for seeing people who need help and acting without hesitation." "I remember what it was like to be desperate," she said quietly. "When I first came here, I had nothing. People helped me. The woman who owned the boarding house gave me a week free so I could establish myself. The general store owner let me buy on credit until I had money. I am just doing what was done for me." "Your heart is too big good," he said, repeating his words from that day on the street months ago. "I am in awe of you." She turned in his arms to face him. "Lincoln, I have something to tell you." He saw the nervousness in her eyes and felt his heartbeat quicken. "What is it?" "I think I am with child," she said softly. "I'm not certain yet, but I believe so." Joy flooded through him, so intense it was almost overwhelming. "Truly, truly," she said, and now she was smiling, her earlier nervousness fading at his obvious happiness. He picked her up, spinning her around gently, laughing with pure delight. "We are going to have a baby. Rose, we are going to have a family." "Are you happy?" she asked, though she could clearly see he was. "Happy does not begin to cover it," he said, setting her down carefully as if she were suddenly fragile. "You have given me everything I did not know I needed. A home, a purpose, love, and now a child. I am the luckiest man alive." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the winter and into spring. Rose continued her sewing work, though Lincoln tried to convince her to rest more. She laughed at his overprotective tendencies, but also found them endearing. He was constantly bringing her special foods, making sure she was comfortable, worrying over every twinge or discomfort. "I am pregnant, not dying," she teased him one afternoon when he insisted on carrying a basket that weighed perhaps 5 pounds. "You are carrying our child," he said seriously. "You are doing the most important work in the world. Let me help with everything else." In April, Clara wrote with exciting news of her own. She had been offered a position as a teacher in a school in Denver, starting in the fall. The position came with a small salary and room and board, and she asked if she could visit Rose and Lincoln in Los Animas on her way to Denver. Rose cried reading the letter, overwhelmed with pride and joy for her sister. "She did it," she said to Lincoln. "She's going to be independent and self-sufficient, everything I hoped for her." "Because of you," Lincoln said. "Your sacrifices made this possible." "Our sacrifices," Rose corrected. "You have sent money to her, too, from your earnings." It was true. Once Lincoln had learned the full extent of Rose's commitment to her sister's education, he had quietly begun contributing, adding his own savings to the money Rose sent. It had never been discussed, just done. Another way he showed his love. Clara arrived in June, a week before Rose was due to deliver. She was a younger version of Rose, with the same green eyes and auburn hair, though her face was rounder and her manner more serious. She embraced her sister tearfully, exclaiming over Rose's swollen belly, and then turned to Lincoln with evaluating eyes. "So you are the mountain man who won my sister's heart," she said. "I am," he agreed, feeling suddenly nervous under her scrutiny. Clara's opinion mattered to Rose, which meant it mattered to him. "She wrote that you are kind and protective, and that you make her happy," Clara continued. "She also wrote that you helped support my education without being asked." "Your sister wanted you to have opportunities," Lincoln said. "It was the least I could do." Clara studied him for a moment longer, then nodded as if satisfied. "I approve," she announced, and Rose laughed, breaking the tension. "I'm so glad," Rose said dryly. "I was worried I might have to choose between you." The three of them settled into an easy rhythm over the following days. Clara helped with household tasks, fascinated by everything Lincoln could teach her about the frontier. She had lived her whole life in Boston and found the wide-open spaces both thrilling and intimidating. Lincoln took her on short walks, pointing out plants and animals, teaching her the same things he had taught Rose. On a warm evening in late June, Rose's labor began. Lincoln sent Clara running for the midwife while he stayed with Rose, holding her hand and trying not to show his own fear. He had faced down bears and survived blizzards, but watching Rose in pain was harder than any of that. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next morning. Lincoln stayed by her side the entire time, wiping her forehead with cool cloths, murmuring encouragement, letting her squeeze his hand so hard he lost feeling in his fingers. When the baby finally emerged, a squalling, red-faced boy with a surprising amount of dark hair, Lincoln felt tears stream down his face. "A son," the midwife announced, placing the baby in Rose's arms. "A healthy, strong son." Rose looked exhausted but radiant, cradling the baby against her chest. "He looks like you," she said to Lincoln, and he could see it was true. The baby had his dark coloring, his strong bone structure. "He has your nose," Lincoln said, touching the tiny face with one massive, gentle finger. "Thank God for that." They named him Thomas, after Lincoln's father, and called him Tommy. Lincoln fell completely in love with his son from the first moment, marveling at the tiny fingers and toes, the perfect miniature features. He held Tommy with the careful reverence of a man who understood how fragile and precious life could be. Clara stayed for 2 weeks, helping Rose recover and learning to care for her nephew. "You have built something beautiful here," she told Rose the night before she left for Denver. "A real home, a real family. I am so happy for you." "You will build your own life in Denver," Rose said. "You will have adventures and opportunities and maybe meet someone special." "Maybe," Clara agreed, "but I have high standards now. I want someone who looks at me the way Lincoln looks at you, like I am the most precious thing in the world." After Clara left, Lincoln and Rose settled into the challenging routine of new parents. Tommy was a fussy baby, crying often and sleeping little, and Lincoln walked him for hours in the middle of the night, his deep voice rumbling lullabies he half remembered from his own childhood. Rose nursed and rested when she could, still taking in some sewing work, though far less than before. "I am sorry I am not more help with your work," Lincoln said one afternoon when Tommy was finally napping. "I know you need the income." "We are managing fine," Rose assured him. "Your leather work brings in more than enough, and we are careful with our money. Besides, this time with Tommy is precious. He will only be this small once." Summer passed in a blur of feeding and diaper changes and stolen moments of sleep. Despite the exhaustion, Lincoln had never been happier. He loved watching Rose with their son, loved the way she sang to him and the fierce protectiveness in her eyes. He loved the weight of Tommy in his arms, the complete trust the baby showed in him. In September, on a cooler afternoon that hinted at the coming autumn, Lincoln took Rose and Tommy for a walk along the river. It was the same place he had first told Rose he loved her, and he felt the significance of returning here as a family. "Do you remember when I said your heart was too big good?" he asked as they sat on a blanket, Tommy sleeping between them. "I remember," Rose said, smiling. "Your grammar was terrible, but your meaning was clear." "I've been thinking about that day a lot," Lincoln said. "About seeing you give that hat to the bald man, about how that single act of kindness changed my entire life." "It changed mine too," Rose said. "You made me a new hat and told me I deserved to be honored. No one had ever said anything like that to me before." "You gave away something precious without hesitation, because someone needed it more than you did," Lincoln continued. "That is who you are. That is what I fell in love with. And now I watch you with Tommy, giving him everything he needs, putting him first always. And I'm reminded every day why I'm the luckiest man alive." Rose reached across their sleeping son to take Lincoln's hand. "You know what I think about? I think about how you were not content to just tell me my heart was good. You made me a new hat. You backed up your words with actions. You have been doing that ever since. Every day you show me through your choices that you value me and honor me. That is why I fell in love with you." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the river flow past, listening to the rustle of cottonwood leaves in the breeze. Tommy stirred and made small sounds, but did not wake. "I want to make a promise to you," Lincoln said. "I promise that I will always see you, really see you, the way I saw you that day on the street. I will never take you for granted or forget what a gift you are. I will spend every day trying to be worthy of the love you have given me." "You already are worthy," Rose said softly, "but I promise the same thing. I will always see the man who looked at my kindness to a stranger and called it precious. I will always honor the courage it took for you to come down from the mountains and risk connection again. I will never forget how lucky I am to have found you." As autumn progressed, Lincoln's business continued to grow. Word of his craftsmanship spread, and he began receiving orders from people in Denver and even further east. The money was good, better than he had imagined possible, and he was able to expand his workshop and hire an apprentice, a young man named David, who was eager to learn the trade. Rose gradually increased her sewing work as Tommy grew and became easier to manage. She did not need the income as desperately as before, but she enjoyed her work and took pride in her skill. They fell into a partnership where each supported the other's endeavors, sharing childcare and household duties without rigid division of roles. The old bald man, whose name they learned was Henry, became a fixture in their lives. He had been a prospector who had lost everything to bad luck and drink, and the kindness Rose had shown him that day had been a turning point. He stopped drinking, found work doing odd jobs around town, and saved his money carefully. He never forgot the hat Rose had given him, wearing it every day, and he often stopped by their house to visit and play with Tommy. "That baby is lucky to have parents like you," Henry said one afternoon, bouncing Tommy on his knee while Rose and Lincoln prepared dinner. "You two are good people, the best I have known." "We are just doing our best," Rose said, but she was pleased by his words. "That's all any of us can do," Henry agreed. "But some folks do not even try that much. You two try, and you succeed. You make the world a bit better just by being in it." Winter came again, Tommy's first, and Lincoln made sure the house was tight and warm. He stocked firewood and food, prepared for the worst weather, drew on all his mountain experience to keep his family safe and comfortable. On cold nights, they huddled together by the fire, Tommy sleeping in his cradle nearby, and talked about their dreams for the future. "Wait. I want to expand the workshop," Lincoln said. "Maybe take on another apprentice, build up a real business that could support not just us, but others too. I want to create something lasting." "I want to start a sewing circle," Rose said. "Teach other women the skills they need to support themselves. Maybe even work with Clara to start a small school here in Los Animas." They supported each other's dreams, making plans and setting goals. Life in Los Animas was not always easy, but it was theirs, built on mutual respect and genuine affection. They argued sometimes, as all couples do, but they had learned to communicate honestly and resolve conflicts without cruelty or manipulation. Spring of 1880 brought new growth and new possibilities. Tommy was walking now, toddling around the house and getting into everything with the fearless curiosity of a child who knows he is loved and safe. Rose discovered she was pregnant again, and this time Lincoln was more prepared, less frantically worried, though still deeply protective. "I hope it is a girl this time," Rose said as they lay in bed one night, her hand resting on her still flat stomach. "I would love to have a daughter." "I will love whoever comes," Lincoln said, covering her hand with his, "boy or girl, as long as they are healthy and you are healthy." Clara visited again that summer, full of stories about her teaching position in Denver. She had found a community of educators and reformers, people who believed in women's education and rights, and she was thriving in the environment. She had also met a man, a schoolteacher named James, and though she was cautious about the relationship, Rose could see the happiness in her sister's eyes when she spoke of him. "He respects my work," Clara told Rose. "He does not expect me to give up teaching if we marry. He believes women should have the same opportunities as men." "Then he is worthy of you," Rose said firmly. "Do not settle for less." "I learned that from watching you in Lincoln," Clara said. "You showed me what a real partnership looks like. I will not accept anything less." The baby came in December, during a snowstorm that reminded Lincoln of his mountain years. This time the labor was shorter, and when the midwife announced, "It is a girl," Rose wept with joy. They named her Sarah, and she was different from Tommy from the start. Where he had been fussy and demanding, she was calm and observant. She had Rose's green eyes and auburn hair, and Lincoln fell in love all over again, marveling that he could have such a perfect daughter. With two small children, life became more chaotic but also richer. Tommy adored his baby sister, wanting to help with everything even when his help was more hindrance. Lincoln expanded the house again, adding another bedroom and a larger kitchen. His business was thriving, and he had 3 apprentices now, training them in the craft he loved. Rose's sewing circle had grown to include a dozen women, meeting weekly to share skills and support each other. She had also begun working with Clara, who visited regularly, to plan a small school for Los Animas. The town was growing, and there were enough children now to justify a real schoolhouse with a trained teacher. One afternoon in the spring of 1881, Rose was sitting in the shade of their house, nursing Sarah while Tommy played nearby, when she saw an old wagon approaching. As it drew closer, she recognized the Crawford family, the people she and Lincoln had helped years before during that cold winter. Matthew Crawford looked healthier now, more prosperous, and when he climbed down from the wagon, he was smiling. "Mrs. Yates," he said, removing his hat, "I hope you remember us." "Of course," Rose said, standing carefully with Sarah in her arms. "Mr. Crawford, how good to see you. Are you well?" "We are very well, thanks to you and your husband," he said. "We homesteaded land about 30 miles north of here, and we have done well. We have built a good farm, and we wanted to thank you properly." He gestured to the wagon, which was loaded with supplies. Sacks of flour and sugar, smoked meat, canned goods, fabric, and tools. "We know you did not help us expecting repayment, but we could not live with ourselves without acknowledging the debt. You saved our lives that winter." Rose felt tears prick her eyes. "You did not need to do this. We were happy to help." "We know," Matthew said, "but we wanted to. Your husband told us to pay it forward, and we have. We have helped other families in need, but we also wanted to make sure you knew how much your kindness meant to us. Our children are healthy and happy because of what you did." Lincoln arrived home to find the Crawfords unloading supplies, and Rose explaining through tears what had happened. He shook Matthew's hand firmly, deeply moved by the gesture. "You have done well for yourselves," he said. "That is the best thanks you could give us." They invited the Crawfords to stay for dinner, and the evening was filled with good food and conversation. Sarah Crawford, Matthew's wife, spent time with Rose admiring baby Sarah and playing with Tommy. Their own children, older now and thriving, were polite and well-behaved, evidence of good parenting and stable home life. After the Crawfords left, Rose and Lincoln sat together on their porch, watching the sunset over the Colorado plains. "I never expected that," Rose said. "I never expected to be thanked like that." "You planted seeds of kindness years ago," Lincoln said. "Now they are bearing fruit. That is how it works. Every good thing you do ripples outward in ways you cannot predict or control." "Do you think Tommy and Sarah will grow up to be kind?" Rose asked, a question that had been weighing on her mind. "They are growing up watching you be kind every day," Lincoln said. "They are learning by example. They will have their own challenges and make their own choices, but we are giving them the best foundation we can." Years passed in a blur of children growing, businesses thriving, and community building. Clara married her schoolteacher James in 1882, and they moved to Los Animas to run the new school that Rose and others had worked to establish. The town was growing steadily, attracting families and businesses, becoming more than just a rough frontier settlement. Tommy grew into a sturdy boy who loved working with his father in the leather shop, showing an early aptitude for the craft. Sarah was quieter, but equally determined, often found reading or drawing, her green eyes serious as she concentrated. In 1883, Rose gave birth to another son, whom they named Daniel. And then in 1885, twin girls arrived, Emma and Grace, much to everyone's surprise and joy. The house expanded again to accommodate the growing family, and Lincoln hired more help for the workshop so he could spend time with his children. He taught Tommy to track animals and read the weather, passing on the skills he had learned in the mountains. He taught Sarah to work leather, pleased when she showed real talent. He carried Daniel on his shoulders and sang to the twins, marveling that his life had become so full when it had once been so empty. Rose continued her sewing and her work with the community, though she had less time for it with 5 children. But she was happy deeply satisfied with the life she and Lincoln had built. They still had their quiet moments together, stolen hours when the children were asleep, where they talked and planned and simply enjoyed each other's presence. One evening in 1886, as they sat on their porch watching the children play in the yard, Lincoln took Rose's hand. "Do you remember when I told you that you made me realize what it meant to be human again?" "I remember," Rose said. "I did not fully understand what I meant then," Lincoln continued, "but I understand it now. Being human is not just surviving. It is not just existing from one day to the next. Being human is connecting with others, building something larger than yourself, creating family and community. You taught me that. You showed me through your actions every day that the point of life is love. Love for each other, love for our children, love for our community. That is what makes life worth living." Rose leaned her head on his broad shoulder, content and at peace. "You taught me things too. You taught me that I deserve to be valued, that kindness is strength, not weakness, that asking for help is not failure. You taught me that love can be steady and sure, not just passionate, but also comfortable." They watched Tommy help Sarah build something with scraps of wood, watched Daniel chase the twins around the yard, heard their laughter mixing with the evening birdsong. This was their legacy, Lincoln thought. Not just the children they had created, but the values they had instilled, the example they had set, the ripples of kindness spreading outward from their choices. Henry, the old bald man, had become like family to them over the years. He had his own small house now, earned through hard work and frugal living, and he visited regularly, beloved by all the children who called him Uncle Henry. He still wore the hat Rose had given him all those years ago, though it was worn now and patched. When Lincoln offered to make him a new one, Henry refused. "This hat is precious to me," he said. "It reminds me of the day my life changed, the day someone saw me not as a failure or a drunk, but as a human being worth helping. I will wear it until it falls apart." In 1887, the town of Los Animas held a celebration for its 20th anniversary of incorporation, and Lincoln and Rose were asked to speak about their experiences as longtime residents and business owners. Rose was nervous about speaking publicly, but Lincoln encouraged her. "Tell them your story," he said. "Tell them about coming here with nothing, building a business through hard work, supporting your sister's education. Tell them about the sewing circle and the school. You have done so much for this community." When Rose stood before the gathered crowd, her voice was quiet at first, but gained strength as she spoke. She talked about arriving in Los Animas alone and frightened, about the kindness of strangers who had helped her, about building a life through determination and community support. She talked about her belief that people should help each other, that prosperity meant nothing if it was not shared, that a strong community lifted everyone up. Lincoln watched her with pride, seeing the woman he had fallen in love with shining through every word. She was older now, lines around her eyes and threads of silver in her auburn hair, but to him she was as beautiful as the day he had first seen her. More beautiful, perhaps, because now he knew her fully, understood the depth of her character, the strength of her spirit. After Rose spoke, it was Lincoln's turn. He kept it brief, uncomfortable with being the center of attention, but he managed to articulate what he wanted to say. "I came to Las Animas looking for something I could not name," he said. "I found it in the people here, in the community we have built together, but most especially in my wife Rose. She showed me what it means to live with an open heart, to give without expecting return, to see the humanity in everyone. I am grateful every day for this town and the life I have here." The celebration continued into the evening with music and dancing, and Lincoln waltzed with Rose under strings of lanterns, holding her close, grateful for every moment they had shared and every moment yet to come. As their children grew older, they each developed distinct personalities and dreams. Tommy at 12 was already skilled in leatherwork and talked about expanding the business someday. Sarah at 10 showed artistic talent and dreamed of studying art in a big city, though she loved Las Animas and wanted to return eventually. Daniel at 7 was obsessed with horses and wanted to be a rancher. The twins at 5 were still young, but already showing signs of being as different as day and night, Emma bold and adventurous, Grace gentle and thoughtful. Rose worried sometimes about her children, about whether she was raising them right, preparing them adequately for the world. Lincoln reassured her constantly, pointing out their kindness to each other, their respect for others, their work ethic and curiosity. "They are good children," he said. "We have given them strong roots and taught them to spread their wings. That is all any parent can do." In 1889, Clara and James had their first child, a daughter they named Rose after her beloved aunt. Lincoln and Rose traveled to Denver to meet the baby, bringing their own children for the visit. It was a joyful reunion, with Clara tearfully thanking Rose again for the sacrifices she had made years ago. "I would not be here without you," Clara said, holding baby Rose close. "I would not have had the education that led to teaching, would not have met James, would not have this beautiful daughter. You gave me my life, big sister." "You gave yourself your life," Rose corrected gently. "I just helped you reach for it. You did the hard work." On the train ride home, Lincoln held Rose's hand and said, "You know what I realized today? That day on the street when you gave your hat to Henry, you were not just helping one old man. You were setting in motion a chain of events that changed multiple lives. Henry got sober and rebuilt his life. I fell in love with you and found purpose again. We built a family and business that supports others. The Crawfords learned to pay kindness forward. Clara became a teacher and now has her own family. All of that traces back to a single moment of compassion." "I just gave away a hat," Rose protested. "You gave away a hat you could not afford to lose because someone else needed it more," Lincoln said. "That is everything. That's the whole point. And I saw it, and I recognized something in you that I had been missing in my own life, and everything changed." Rose was quiet for a long moment, watching the landscape pass by the train window. "Do you know what I think about sometimes? I think about what would have happened if you had not been there that day, if you had not seen me give the hat away. Would we still have found each other?" "I like to think we would have," Lincoln said. "I was already drawn to you before that moment, but seeing your kindness, seeing your heart so clearly revealed, that gave me the courage to act. That made me understand what I was feeling." "I am glad you acted," Rose said, leaning against him. "I'm glad you made me a new hat and said my heart was too big good." They laughed together, remembering his mangled grammar, remembering how that awkward declaration had been the start of everything. The years continued to pass, marked by birthdays and holidays, graduations and marriages, grandchildren and community milestones. Las Animas grew into a proper town with paved streets and electric lights, a far cry from the dusty frontier settlement it had been when Lincoln first arrived. His leather business became one of the most successful in Colorado, with his work sought after across the region. Rose's sewing circle evolved into a women's cooperative that provided support and resources for women in need. Henry passed away peacefully in his sleep in 1893 at the age of 75. At his funeral, Rose spoke about the day they had met, about how his acceptance of a simple gift had given her the courage to continue being generous even when she had little to give. The old hat was buried with him, placed in his hands, a symbol of kindness given and received. Tommy married a local girl named Elizabeth in 1895, and they built a house next to Lincoln and Rose's property. He took over the main leather business while Lincoln focused on training new apprentices and creating custom pieces. Sarah went to art school in San Francisco, but returned to Las Animas in 1898, opening a small gallery where she sold her paintings and work from other local artists. Daniel became a rancher, buying land north of town and building a successful cattle operation. The twins, as they grew, revealed talents of their own, Emma becoming a teacher like her Aunt Clara, and Grace studying medicine, determined to become a doctor. Lincoln and Rose watched their children build their lives with the satisfaction of parents who knew they had done their job well. Their children were not perfect, but they were good people who contributed to their community and treated others with respect. They had learned the lessons of kindness and hard work, of courage and compassion. On their 20th wedding anniversary in 1899, the town threw a party in Lincoln and Rose's honor, recognizing their contributions to Las Animas over the years. There were speeches and gifts, music and dancing, and through it all, Lincoln kept Rose close, his arm around her waist, his love for her evident to everyone who saw them. When they finally had a quiet moment alone, standing under the stars outside the community hall, Lincoln said, 20 years. It feels like both a lifetime and a moment. I know what you mean, Rose said. So much has happened, so much has changed, but the core of it, the love between us, that has stayed constant. You are still the woman who gave her hat away, Lincoln said. You still see people who are hurting and act without hesitation to help. You still have that heart that is too big good. And you are still the man who honored that kindness, Rose said. You still protect and provide, still create beauty with your hands, still make me feel valued and loved every single day. They stood together in comfortable silence, listening to the music and laughter drifting from the hall, thinking about the journey that had brought them to this moment. From that day on, the dusty street, when a mountain man saw a woman give her hat to a stranger and recognized something precious, to this celebration of 2 decades of marriage and partnership, it had been a remarkable journey. Do you have any regrets? Rose asked, a question she had never posed before. Lincoln considered carefully, wanting to give an honest answer. I regret the years I spent alone in the mountains after I knew I should come down, he said finally. I wasted time being afraid of connection, but I do not regret the path that led me to you. Every choice, every hardship, everything brought me to that shop where you walked in looking for a hat. So no real regrets. You? None, Rose said firmly. There were hard times, frightening times, moments when I did not know if I would survive. But all of it was worth it to end up here, with you, with our family, with this life we have built. As they grew older, Lincoln and Rose took on the roles of elders in the community, offering advice and support to younger couples and families. They had become living examples of what a good marriage could be, how partnership and respect and genuine affection could sustain a relationship through decades and challenges. Their grandchildren adored them, especially the stories Lincoln told about his mountain years and the tales Rose shared about coming west alone. They were seen as romantic figures, proof that true love existed and could endure. In 1905, on a warm summer evening, Lincoln and Rose sat on their porch as they had done thousands of times before. They were both in their 50s now, Lincoln's hair shot through with gray, Rose's face lined with the marks of a life well lived. But they still held hands, still found comfort in each other's presence. I have been thinking about that bald man again, Lincoln said suddenly. Henry, about how your kindness to him changed everything. I think about him too, Rose said. I think about how scared I was that day, how uncertain about my future. I gave him the hat because it was the right thing to do, but also because, in helping someone else, I felt less helpless myself. It was as much for me as for him. That is what makes it even more beautiful, Lincoln said. You were struggling yourself, but you still saw someone in greater need and acted. That takes real courage and character. I learned it from watching my mother, Rose said quietly. She was always helping others, even when we had little ourselves. She used to say that we are all in this life together, that helping others is not charity, but basic humanity. I try to live by that. And you have passed it on to our children, Lincoln said. I see it in the way Tommy treats his workers, the way Sarah uses her art to raise money for causes she believes in, the way Daniel helps neighboring ranchers, the way Emma teaches children others have given up on, the way Grace wants to become a doctor to help people who cannot afford fancy city physicians. They learned by watching you. They learned from both of us, Rose insisted. You have always been generous with your time and knowledge, training apprentices, helping people with repairs even when they cannot pay. You were just quieter about it. I learned it from you, Lincoln said simply. Before I met you, I kept to myself. I did my work and minded my business. You showed me that there was more to life than that being part of a community means contributing to it, that we have obligations to each other. As the last light faded from the sky, they went inside to the home they had built together, filled with memories and love. Lincoln banked the fire while Rose checked the windows, moving through routines so familiar they were like a dance. They climbed into bed, Lincoln's arm automatically reaching for Rose, pulling her close against his side. I love you, he said, words he spoke every night. I love you too, she replied, her standard response, but the words never lost their meaning through repetition. They fell asleep, as they had for 26 years, wrapped around each other, secure in the knowledge that whatever tomorrow brought, they would face it together. The years advanced into the new century, bringing changes both welcome and challenging. Automobiles appeared on the streets of Las Animas, electricity became standard, The world was becoming more connected and faster paced. Lincoln sometimes felt overwhelmed by the changes, but Rose adapted easily, embracing new technologies and ideas while maintaining the core values that had always guided her. Their children gave them grandchildren, and then those grandchildren began having children of their own. Lincoln and Rose became great-grandparents, marveling at the expanding web of family that had all started with two people meeting in a leather shop. In 1915, Las Animas celebrated its 50th anniversary of incorporation, and Lincoln and Rose were asked to participate again, this time as some of the oldest continuing residents. They were both in their 60s now, moving more slowly but still active and engaged with their community. When Rose spoke this time, her voice was stronger and surer than it had been at the previous celebration. She talked about the changes she had witnessed, the growth of the town, but also about the constants that had endured. "Community is built on small acts of kindness," she said, "on seeing each other as fellow human beings deserving of respect and compassion. That has not changed in 50 years, and it should not change in the next 50. We succeed together or not at all." Lincoln's speech was also brief but heartfelt. "I came to this town as a stranger, knowing no one, uncertain of my place," he said. "This community welcomed me and gave me a home. More importantly, it gave me the opportunity to meet my wife, to build a family, to create a life worth living. I am grateful every day for Las Animas and the people here. You have given me everything that matters." After the speeches, a young reporter from the Denver newspaper approached them, wanting to write a story about longtime residents of frontier towns. He was particularly interested in their love story, having heard rumors about the romantic circumstances of their meeting. Lincoln and Rose agreed to the interview, sitting together in their home, surrounded by photographs and mementos of their long life together. The reporter, a young man no more than 25, was wide-eyed as he listened to their story. "So you saw her give away a hat to a stranger, and you fell in love?" he asked, trying to understand. It was more than that," Lincoln tried to explain. "It was what that action revealed about her character. It was the selflessness, the immediate response to another person's suffering, the willingness to sacrifice something valuable for a stranger's comfort. In that moment, I saw the kind of person she was, and I knew I wanted to be close to that goodness." "And you, Mrs. Yates?" The reporter turned to Rose. "Did you know he was watching?" "Not at all," Rose said, smiling. "I was just trying to help someone who was suffering. I had no idea that my action would lead to all of this." She gestured around the room, indicating not just the physical space, but everything their life together represented. "Do you think that kind of love is still possible today?" the reporter asked. "With the world changing so fast, with people becoming more modern and independent?" Lincoln and Rose looked at each other, communicating silently the way longtime couples could. "Love has not changed," Rose said finally. "People still want connection, still want to be seen and valued for who they truly are. The circumstances may be different, the courtship may look different, but the fundamental human need for love and partnership that remains constant. The key is to pay attention," Lincoln added, "to really see the people around you, to notice not just what they say, but what they do. Actions reveal character. Rose gave away that hat, and I saw her heart. I paid attention to that moment instead of just walking past. That is what young people need to do now, pay attention to each other, really see each other." The article that resulted from the interview was published in several newspapers and brought renewed attention to Lincoln and Rose's story. They received letters from young couples saying they had been inspired, from older couples saying the story reminded them of their own courtships, from people all over who simply wanted to say that the world needed more stories of genuine love and kindness. Rose was embarrassed by the attention, but Lincoln was secretly pleased that their story might inspire others to act with kindness and to recognize it when they saw it. As they entered their 70s, Lincoln and Rose slowed down considerably. Lincoln could no longer work full days in the shop, his hands stiff with arthritis, though he still trained apprentices and did custom work when his hands allowed. Rose still did some sewing, but her eyes were not what they once were, and she had passed leadership of the Women's Cooperative to younger members. But they were content, surrounded by family and friends, secure in the knowledge that they had lived good lives and made positive contributions to their community. They spent their days in comfortable routine, reading together, walking slowly around their property, receiving visits from children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. One afternoon in the spring of 1920, they sat together on their porch, a familiar scene repeated countless times over their 41 years of marriage. The world had changed dramatically since they had first met, but this moment, this quiet companionship, remained exactly the same. "Lincoln," Rose said suddenly, "do you remember when you told me my heart was too big good?" "Of course," he said, smiling at the memory. "How could I forget? It was the moment I realized I loved you." "I've been thinking about that phrase lately," Rose said. "At the time I thought you meant I was too generous, that I gave too much away. But now I understand it differently. I think you meant that my capacity for compassion was overwhelming to you, that it was both big and good, not too much, but just right, expansive and moral at the same time." Lincoln was quiet for a moment, surprised and pleased by her interpretation. "You're right," he said. "That is exactly what I meant, even if I did not know it at the time. Your heart is big enough to hold everyone you meet with compassion, and good enough that you act on that compassion even when it costs you something. That is rare and precious." "You have that too," Rose said. "You just express it differently. Where I give things away, you create things and share your knowledge. Where I respond emotionally, you respond practically. But the impulse is the same, to help others, to contribute to something larger than yourself." "We are well matched," Lincoln agreed. "Different but complementary. That is why we have lasted so long." They sat in silence again, comfortable and at peace. The afternoon sun was warm, and Lincoln felt himself drifting toward sleep, Rose's head resting on his shoulder. This was happiness, he thought. Not excitement or passion, though they had experienced those things over the years. But this quiet contentment, this absolute comfort in another person's presence, this was the real gift of long love. As the sun set on another day, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, Lincoln and Rose watched together from their porch. They had watched thousands of sunsets from this spot, but each one was still beautiful, still worthy of attention and appreciation. "Thank you," Rose said softly. "For what?" Lincoln asked. "For seeing me that day," she said. "For recognizing something in my action that I did not even recognize in myself. For making me a new hat and starting this whole journey. For 41 years of love and partnership. For being exactly who you are." Lincoln kissed the top of her head, his throat tight with emotion. "Thank you for giving that hat away," he said. "For being kind to a stranger. For having a heart big and good enough to change my entire life. For choosing me and building this life with me. I would not trade a single day of it." As darkness fell and the stars emerged one by one, Lincoln and Rose remained on their porch, holding hands as they always had, grateful for the life they had built from a single moment of witnessed kindness. The years stretched behind them, full of memories and meaning, and whatever years remained ahead, they would face them together as they always had. Two people joined by love and mutual regard, a mountain man and the woman whose heart was too big good, who had found each other in a dusty frontier town and created something beautiful that would endure long after they were gone. Their legacy lived on in their children and grandchildren, in the businesses they had built, in the community they had strengthened, in the countless small acts of kindness they had performed and inspired in others. But most of all, their legacy lived in the simple truth that love matters, that kindness matters, that paying attention to each other and acting with compassion can change lives in ways both small and profound. And on that spring evening in 1920, as an aging mountain man held his wife close and watched the stars emerge over the Colorado plains, Lincoln Yates felt a deep and abiding gratitude for the day he had seen Rose Harper give her hat to a bald stranger, for the moment that had changed everything, for the simple act of kindness that had led to a lifetime of love. The years continued gently for Lincoln and Rose. They celebrated their 45th wedding anniversary in 1924 with a large gathering of family, nearly 100 people claiming connection to them through blood or friendship. Looking around at the crowd, Lincoln felt overwhelmed by the web of relationships that had grown from that first meeting in his shop. Tommy,